Good morning, everyone. Well, good afternoon, I think. Yeah, so just a little bit about myself. I'm a data scientist. I work with IBM. And as part of the work we do, we work with clients to identify how can they make the best out of AI in data. So it's a big challenge all throughout today and all throughout tomorrow. This is what everyone's going to be talking about, how to really benefit from AI. How can we leverage data in AI? How can we benefit our countries, our businesses, our organizations from this? So this is pretty much what we do in the team. So I wanted to go through some of the principles we follow, some of the things we do with clients to make sure they really get the best out of that. Now, as you can see, is this working? Yeah. So as you can see from this slide, data is all around us. There is a lot of data being generated in huge volumes all around us. For example, you get 41.6 million messages sent per minute. If you can imagine what can you do and analyze when you analyze this data to understand, human interaction, what people ask about the most. So this is all valuable information. But the problem is us as humans cannot really understand and make value out of these relationships. So for a human to be able to analyze 41 million messages a minute, that's not going to be possible. Now, this is where AI really comes into play. This is where data science comes into play. This is where all the technologies we've been talking about over the past hours and throughout tomorrow, this is where they can help us. Now, with AI, we will be able to close the gap between all this proliferation of data and the compute and the processing required to make benefit out of this data. And when I say benefit, what do I really mean by that? So if you look at this recent survey that was done earlier this year, it's funny that still many organizations do not identify as data-driven. This survey was done with 64 C-level executives from some of the largest corporations in the world. This includes banks, some of the largest banks, and some of the largest automakers. The majority of them, around 69% of them, do not identify as data-driven. It means they have tons of data. Imagine a car manufacturing company that has all this diagnostics and data about their cars and how people use their cars. They're not leveraging this data enough. So there are a lot of missed opportunities out there in the world. So when people say the region is still not yet there, Jordan still has some way to go, the whole world still has a lot of way to go before we really make value out of all this AI around us. Now, the other sad/interesting point is that the trend is getting worse over time. So they've run this survey for the past 3 years. And if you see the numbers, the less and less companies are identifying as data-driven, which means there's something wrong going on out there that we have to pause, stop, think, why aren't we getting better? Why aren't we making more out of our data? The people asked in this survey gave the following top reasons why, and there are more to it than that. So the primary reason here is organizational alignment. This is basically when the organization or the government has a policy, but not everyone throughout the organization is able to follow out through this strategy. It doesn't mean they don't want to, but it could be that they are not able to. So this is one very important reason. Another one is culture. So people sometimes do not want to embrace AI for a variety of different reasons. The biggest one is fear. They're afraid AI will do something and take over their jobs. Down the line, as you can see, leadership. So in general, leaders sometimes often they want to embrace AI because they see the potential of using AI to empower their organization, but it's not a big reason of why people are not data-driven. The other major reason is skills. This is another survey done earlier this year as well that shows that even though people have problems with data, they do not identify as data-driven. The other face of the coin is they don't have the right skills or the right talent in their organization to be able to properly leverage this data and bring value from it. Now, I was actually reading yesterday or 2 days ago another survey from McKinsey So what they've noticed is that the gap between the leaders in AI and those who are really leveraging AI in their organization and others is really getting bigger and bigger. And as mentioned earlier in the talk, even in governments, the leaders are the leaders and the others are still lagging behind more and more over time. The primary reason is, according to the survey, is culture. People, organizations that succeed are the ones that have embraced AI in every level of their organization, whether it's the developers down there, whether it's operations teams, finance, or whether it's the executive level or the decision makers in the organization, everyone has understood and embraced the fact that AI will help them. So this was the primary result of that survey. Now, with all this data around us, how can we really practically take it and benefit from that? The answer is, of course, AI. But how? So sometimes people do not think of AI this way, but the way I like to put AI is it's a system. You give it data, and it helps you make a decision. It's as simple as that. It takes an input data, and then helps you make a decision. This decision has an impact on the business, has a benefit, has added value. How do you train AI? How does the AI system recognize and give you this decision? Data. So this is how it all fits together. If you don't have good data, if the data you have is garbage, garbage in, garbage out. So an AI system is only as good as the data your organization generates. And if your organization does not generate data and does not have access to data, you will never be able to implement AI. That's how tight the correlation is between properly and successfully implementing AI and the data you own in your organization. Now, how does it all work? So you've got data. Data is all about records, transactions, numbers, and everything. When you start identifying pattern in this data, you start having information. Now, to take it to the next level, once you've identified this information and you identify recurring patterns, these are patterns that happen very often, you start to take conclusions out of this data. For example, if you notice that people who commit, for example, fraud in a bank are people who do a certain kind of transaction. So this is a pattern that starts to occur very often. This is how you start teaching AI on what to look for in the data. Once you've identified what are the patterns, this is where the AI starts to build the relationship between these inputs and outputs. People who buy a certain product are more likely to commit fraud. So there's a relationship here. What really is, so AI right now is some of the best systems are somewhere between these 2 points, where it's all about finding the correct pattern. Because funny enough, you can find a relationship between the number of elephants in Africa and the number of balloons in Chicago. You can find a relationship around that. But the question is this a valid relationship? Does this relationship help me? Does this relationship make an impact on my organization? Is there value out of this relationship or not? This is the key differentiator between people who do AI for the sake of doing AI and people who succeed and bring value to their organization from AI. So in essence, the question is not what AI I do. It's not about the technology, it's about the business. How is the AI impacting me? Is it improving the customer experience? Is it reducing operational costs? Is it reducing, for example, is it reducing the time the employees take to do something? So this is where the real impact of AI is. And this is how, if you want to measure your success, these are the things you should be looking at. Now, this is all good talk, and now we know how to leverage AI, how to leverage the data we have. But there's more to it than that. So if you remember from the surveys earlier, the key inhibitors, the key points that prevent such organizations from really leveraging AI is primarily skills. First one is skills. So there is a huge gap between supply and demand. And this is something everyone around the world is trying to race to close the gap between what's required, the skill required, and the demand needed. And sorry, the supply available. And to be honest, the Arab world in general is in a good position in this race. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of desire from the youth. And this conference is probably one of the best examples of this case. People want to embrace this technology. People want to improve their skills. It's all about enabling them, giving them the right opportunities to become skilled in the required tools and skills needed to close this gap. Now, not only skills, but there is also the culture of the organization. It's the way the organization perceives AI. Now, there are traditional organizations, and unfortunately, in the Arab world, these are huge problems. Because, it's part of the way Arabs do the business here. People tend to avoid sharing information. People want to keep the benefits for themselves. They don't want to share even within their own departments. So this is a very big inhibitor to progress in AI. And unfortunately, unless an organization realizes that you should start sharing, or you should at least put a process to enable to exchange information, this will not work. The second point is agility, and this was a topic touched upon earlier today. You have to be able to build fast and fail fast. And this is what assumably is the culture of startups. And there are a lot of them around here today. So even though startups fail very often, but if they fail, they can always get back up, come up with a new idea and move forward. If organizations remain in bureaucracy and, if you want to do something in an organization, you have to go 10 levels up and speak to the CEO and the founder and so on to get an approval. By the time you get the approval, people would have done what you wanted. People would have used AI and they would have gotten the business advantage over you. So this is why it's very important to start to become agile and experimental. Then what you've got is experience-based versus data-driven. Unfortunately, that's another big thing here. Simply because the CEO owns the company, whatever he or she says is going to happen in the company. If you don't use AI to or at least data to justify your decisions, if you don't prove that what you decide to do is because of X, Y, Z, and because of the data says so, it's not going to work. You're probably going to be at a disadvantage compared to other organizations. Because data does not lie. Data tells you the truth. It tells you what's out there. And if you don't want to listen to data, it's up to you. But at the end, it's you who's going to either benefit or who's going to fail. Then what you've got is embracing technology and fear of AI. Again, people have spoken about this a lot. I don't want to dwell on this point. But if the employees themselves do not understand, and the customers, if they do not understand that AI is there to help them, this is also one big issue that's hindering the proliferation and the availability of AI all around us. Now, finally, as you can see, the last part is the technology and the processes. This is not as important as culture and skills. This is all about, so this is something here at IBM we like to show, which is how to properly progress through what's called an AI ladder, how to prepare your data to be usable through AI. The first step is own data, have data, organized, accessible, people know where is it, who owns it, and how to get it. The second step is organize data. So understand how does the different data sets you have, how does, for example, customer data relate to transactions in the organization. Try to understand how things relate to each other. Once you've understood how things relate to each other, then you can start analyzing this information and building, using machine learning, start developing these decisions, these predictions, these classifications to help you in your organization. And finally, whatever output is of the AI system, you start embedding in your organization's processes. So pretty much, if you notice, this is a mixture of processes and a mixture of technology. It's not as important as culture and skills, because if you don't have culture and skills, it's not going to work. The reason I went through all of this is because this is how we operate. Our team is called the AI Lab. And in essence, what we do is we go to a client, we speak with this client, we see what data do they have, is it accessible, is it organized? We see, are the people skilled enough? So this is a very big thing we work with on clients, making sure that their people know how to handle data, how to clean data, how to build models. And then finally, you've got the technology platform, which is uh, whether they want to use open source, whether they want to get from a certain cloud provider, they want to get it from us, they want to build their own tools. So this is where we come with them and tell them, this is what you need. You don't need more than that. So a combination of all of these is what really helps you achieve, successfully implement AI in your organization. Yeah, this is more of a summary. So step one, make sure you have the right skills. Once you've had the right skills, step two, make sure you got the culture, people are willing. And once you've done that, you have a platform that helps you. So this is about technology. Once you also have the technology and the processes, you identify a suitable business case. So again, I did not touch on this point, and I think it will be touched on later tomorrow. Very often people want to do AI for the sake of AI. It may succeed, it may work, but then what is the return on investment? As a business, as an organization, you need to think money. How is this bringing me money? If I invest, $100,000 on my employees and then maybe another 500,000 on a platform, how am I benefiting? Am I gonna come up with a use case that's flashy and looks nice, or am I gonna come up with something that reduces the cost of my operations? So this is a very important step, and until you've gone through all of these, you will not be able to build AI. To properly build AI, you need to slowly and confidently and make sure you complete each of these steps, complete them all, and that's pretty much it. That's how you get business value from AI. Thank you.